Now that the Lord has brought you this far, are you willing to go the rest of the way with Him? Since God has been with you for this length of time, are you willing to carry on? This is a question that the Israelite people were facing, and some of you have faced it too. Guy was recently broke off with his girlfriend, who was kind of the spiritual strength in the relationship. He's struggling. God, why would you let this happen? Or like a couple whose daughter has kind of left the home and joined a group of people that just hard for them. They wanted more for their daughter. Or a Christian friend that hurt you and it's like, I don't know if I want to go back or anywhere around there. And stuff happens, right? We live in a world with health challenges and other things, and it's like, am I going to go on? The Israelites, as I say, were facing this question because they had been camping and been leading them for the last 40 years since they left Egypt in a very profound way. And change. They were facing a river that they had to cross, and there wasn't any visible way of crossing it. There was an other side, and they're happy about them coming, and they're get into that situation. And so there's some mixed feelings moving forward. There was some danger. But it says at the beginning of chapter 3 and verse 1, it says, early in the morning, I read that there must have been a sense of anticipation. There was a desire to get one. And so early next morning, knowledge, like that from Cedar Grove, went to the Jordan. They camped for crossing over the Jordan River. So there's definitely anticipation. They're excited about this. They're waiting a long time to come to the promised land. And right there, right in front of them, that was exciting. Yet there was spiritual and challenges facing them too. And maybe you've felt like talking to someone retiring, and that sense of fear and anticipation that you face when you get the excitement of having that freedom, and sometimes everything you own is wrapped up in your job, and it's a transition. Another person was talking to about retirement, and they said, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. How long is it? 15 years?" You got a little bit of weight yet. I turned 64 last a couple weeks ago. It's like, okay, I'm getting closer. And I started to think about that. We get into the situation, face the situation, maybe our life stages or health situations, and there's mixed feelings about it all. No doubt the Israeli people were feeling a little bit of that. And after 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, gave orders to the people. And here they are. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord, your God, the ark of the covenant of the Lord was a box, a wooden box, contains special items like the law of Moses, and your man and Aaron's rod, and it was the symbol. It was a symbol of God's presence. It was a visible way of reminding the people that God was with them and God was amongst them. And when the ark moved, they were to move. It was a matter of getting in step with God and moving when He would move, recognizing God is with us. Anyway, so it says, ark of the covenant of the Lord. So let's go back. Your God, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the Levitical priest bring it, you're to move out from positions and follow it. Okay, I want you to follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. This is new ground. It's a new beginning. It's a new adventure. It's a new day. It's a season. You've been waiting a long time. This is the day. And yeah, there's questions. Like I say, there's no boat, no bridge. How are we going to get across? And then there's the problem of leaving everything you've known. All of everything, all been back on this side of the river, and they're crossing over to a new day and a new place. And so that, again, the mixed feelings. That we've never been this way before. This is new. The excitement, yet fear. So when the people broke across the Jordan, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. So the priests are leading, they're carrying the Ark, and when the Ark moves, they move. And they broke camp. They say they've been out 40 years on the side. They're finally going to the promised land. In fact, these people the Jewish people have been out of that land for 400 years. So this is like a long time homecoming. They've been looking, anticipating. They finally are coming back. And it goes on to say, when the Jordan, now the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest. You think, okay, we're crossing a river, flood stage. It's much better than the river it was today. And it's flowing fast, good current. How are we going to get across? We go in here, we're going to be swept downstream. We're all going to die. Like, that's what they're thinking. This was late spring. The rainy season had just ended. The peak of the river was at its peak and flood stage. And in a way, it doesn't make sense. God, is this really timing to be crossing the river? Don't you think it would be better just to wait a little bit, let the water settle down? Like now? This doesn't make sense to me. And this is one of the first things I want to say to these people facing a new situation, a new adventure, had to trust God's timing. God, I'm going to trust you, even though the waters are high, even though it doesn't really make sense that we would cross at the worst time of year to cross the river, but somehow we're going to trust you in this, and we're going to go. And by the way, what day of the year it was? In the Jewish calendar, it says in the next chapter, 14, it gives us a little marker. It says it was on the 10th day of the first month. The people went up from Jordan and camped at Gilgal, eastern border of Jericho. So they go through the river, and the day they crossed through the river was the 10th day of the first month of the Jewish year, which was, you know what day that was? If you go back to Exodus chapter 12, that's the exact same day as the Passover. It was the Passover day. And exactly 40 years after Passover day, they passed through the river. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it was the exact same calendar day. You know, God knows what he's doing. And even though it seemed like a bad time to be crossing the river, this was God's time. Let's get the sense this is part of a careful plan that God has set up for them. So that they begin to cross. And it's a matter of trusting God for his time. And there's stuff we don't understand, right? About God's timing. There's an old story of a farmer in Japan and his son who left the suburbs where they were living and went out to the family homestead where they were bringing in the crops and harvesting, and loaded up their wagon and was pulled by a donkey, and they were heading back to town. And the son was in a hurry to get back to his life in the city, but the dad seemed to be taking forever. He seemed to have all the time in the world. He'd stop and visit with some along the way, and we got to purchase this, we got some stuff to buy here, so a little bit of shopping, and we got to give the donkey a rest, take some time, and so let's have a little snooze here. The son was just getting furious about this delay. And then as they were sitting there resting, there was an explosion, and the city of Hiroshima blew up. And Michael Cloud remember the history and the story behind it all, and the son and dad just stared in horror, looked at what was in front of them. And it took a long time. They sat there in silence, and finally the son said, I'm glad we didn't hurry. And you can imagine, sometimes it just felt like it was the wrong, let's just get going, let's keep moving. And sometimes God just says, be patient and wait, right? Sometimes And that's hard to do, isn't it? It's really hard to be patient when you're in the middle of a hard situation. And sometimes you just have to say, God, I'm just going to trust that you work this out. I'm going to keep following you. I'm going to trust your timing. Yeah, I had a conversation with my daughter quick one this week, just about we're loving on my grandkids. And, as some of you still know the story, I said before, she had trouble having kids, and now she's got two. And it's like, if earlier children that had been born hadn't died prematurely, you wouldn't have these two. And it's like, can you imagine not having? It's like, and you look back, you say, that was hard, but you look back now, it's like, I'm so glad for these two are here. And it's just one of those moments when you start to step back and just remind you that sometimes in the near things, we don't always understand. We don't understand what's going on. We just faith go on, and God in His time will work things out. We need to trust God's timing. And I think even though these people felt like the wrong time to cross the river, it was really the right time to cross the river in God's hand. Because God had something to show them they would have missed. So we need to read on verse 15. Yet, as soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream started flowing. Can you imagine that for a moment? What an amazing thing when they stepped into the water, the flood's edge, at the edge of the water. All of a sudden, the water level started to drop, and in fact, it was on to say, piled up in a heap, a great distance away, in a town called Adam, 40 kilometers away. I kind of joke about this is where we got the word a dam, built, beaver dam or whatever. They built a dam that actually in the Hebrew has nothing to do with that. Adam actually means humanity or mankind. Anyway, it was a sort of a trigger to remember that's where the dam was ever built, right? And a town called a dam, that's where the water piled up in the vicinity of Zarethan. While the water flowing down to the Sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. And again, imagine that scene. Right? They step into the water, wondering how far are they going to get out before they get washed away. But as soon as they step in, the level starts going down. What was once knee deep is now ankle deep. And they take another step, and the water keeps continuing going down as they walk in. And the people are standing back like, wow, this is amazing. And then the priest, it says in verse 17, the priest carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, stopped in the middle of the Jordan, and stood on dry ground at this point. Dry ground by the time they get to the middle. While all Israel passed by until the whole nation and completed the crossing on dry ground. No doubt they're thinking, okay, I remember our parents telling us about when they crossed the Red Sea on dry ground. And this must have been one of those deja vu moments, like, really, wow. We're going to see it again. God is with us. No doubt this would be very affirming for Joshua and his leadership. Even though Moses is gone, Joshua is here with us. Joshua is leading us. And God is with Joshua too. And a very powerful moment. But the thing I want to focus on here is this first step. Right? That courageous first step into the water. They didn't say, well, God didn't say, well, I'm going to stop up the water, and as soon as it stops, then you can proceed on. No, He tells them to step into the water before it started. It wasn't until they stepped into the water that things started to fill up, right? And it just seems to be often that way God works, isn't it? He doesn't give us the plan. He didn't even tell them He's going to stop the water. He just said, step in. And they did. Then He began to work. Isn't that way God often works? I'm reminded of the story of Naaman, the prophet. Naaman, he was encountered by a prophet of God. Naaman came to be healed. He had leprosy in the Old Testament story. He was told to go into this very same river and washed 7 times. And he's like, really? It's kind of dirty river. We have better rivers back home. And he said, you go wash and the leprosy will be gone. And but after 3 or 4 times of washing, it's like, what? This is a waste of my time. By the time he hit the 7th time, it's like God tests our faith sometimes and asks us to step in and do something, and then he responds. I'm not sure why God works that way, but I think it's right into the faith, right? That first step of faith. There's also another encounter Jesus has with 10 lepers. And they come to Jesus asking to be healed. Jesus, go show yourself to the priest. And they're saying, why? We still have leprosy. We're supposed to be in seclusion. They don't want to see us. Jesus says, go. And on the way, they're going, they're healed. Why didn't Jesus heal them right away? Have you ever wondered that? Sometimes God wants us to step into the river first. Are we willing to trust him? Are we willing to demonstrate our faith? I remember when we were starting this church, I had a one of the very first things we did, we held a public information meeting out of the arena just up the street here in the other area. And I remember we advertised this new church starting, and I wasn't sure if anyone was going to show up, but about a dozen people showed up. I was quite encouraged, and I admitted to them, one of the things that scares me most about this venture that I'm starting in on is the music. I don't, people have to worship with playing or leading. That would be bad church. I don't think the church would never get off the ground. And I said, I'm praying, asking God would, bring some people along with some skills. And it turns out in that initial group of people, the keyboard player who stepped up and said, I'd be happy to help play keyboard, and a woman who sang in a band and a very good vocalist. And she came up, I'd be willing to help you sing. It's like, you have to take that step of faith, and then God shows, okay, here's what you've been praying for, here's what you've been asking for. But I had that step of faith, and okay, we're going to go and start a church, but we're missing a lot of pieces. And God said, don't worry about it. You just do what I've called you to do. I remember a couple years ago, almost years now, it's in August, I think, that had the guy from Lionhearts come out to church and talk about rescuing food from various food establishments and bringing it back and then sending it to the food banks. They asked us if we would like as a church to get involved. And my first response was, yeah, that would be kind of a fun thing to do, to be rescuing food. This food scarcity is a bigger issue. Affordability is a bigger issue in our land, and could do something to help. That would be great. So I said yes. Then I talked to another church who just joined in, and we've just started this, and we have 6 people helping us here, and we still don't feel like we have enough. And I all of a sudden thought, oh, what does this do? And we talked about it, we prayed about it some more, and we just feel God wants us to do this. And so we went ahead with it, and God's provided people, and it's been a great experience. But sometimes you just have to take a bit of a step of faith. You don't really know how it's going to work out. We don't know if we have people. We don't know. We say, but God, if this is where you want us to go, if this is what you want me to do, I'm willing to take that step of faith. Right? I remember one of the first things, the conversation I had with God, too, about getting started. I've told this before, of saying, God, how am I going to get some people to come to this church? And one of the things I thought, well, what do I like to do? And maybe I can find other people like that. I said, well, I like to play football. How's that going to hurt? And anyway, so I joined the team and ended up inviting a couple of guys out, and they ended up coming to the church. I remember specifically, it was a little difficult because that game they go out and have some drinks and whatnot, and found out I was a pastor, so they had some tough questions for me. Really, one of the guys says, I hate how churches are always asking for money, pastors paid around, and I hate that. I said, okay, well, don't pass the plate to the church. Oh, that's different. And we have black box back, people give online. Anyway, before all that stuff, that was their idea. The church doesn't want your money. And the other thing they said, oh, yeah, someone said, I heard you can't do anything in church. It's just all men. I said, no, women can do stuff at our church. And they had all these things. I remember uh, dealing with a bunch of questions from some people who had some anger, some issues with the church. And that's kind of a scary thing to go into, but ended up this they made some great friends, and a couple guys ended up even coming here for many years to the church. So it's like sometimes you got to take some steps that are hard. I mean, maybe you don't even understand why, but this is something I can do. This is something God would want me to do to help impact in the church. Anyway, we need to get back to the story. So that's chapter 3. I want to jump into chapter 4 also today. It starts off in chapter 4. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now, you'd think the first, we've just gone through the Jordan, we've had that's kind of phase 1. Now, part 2, right? We're going to the next chapter, the next phase, and expect it to be a battle, right? That was sort of what they were expecting. In fact, it says a few verses later, verse 13, it says about 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. They were expecting that was the next stage. They were prepared. They had 40,000 people ready to combat, but that didn't happen, and there was something more important God wanted to do first. What do you mean? What could be more important? Back to verse 2. It says, choose 12 men, God says. Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing. So they're still out in the water, right? Well, not in the water, dry ground, in the river. They're still out there. And I want you to go back in, 12 people, and grab stones, carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. Why would we do that? In verse 6, serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Why is this pile of stones out here? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan is cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. These stones are a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They went in, people came up and bring out these big stones, heavy as big as they could. They brought them out and they made a memorial. They piled them up. This is the end of the chapter. And Joshua set up at Gilgal 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. From the middle of the Jordan, these stones used to be out there. They're now here because God dried up the Jordan for us to go through. And this is a memorial. And this is important. He wants them to remember this day and what happened. It was significant. Don't forget what just happened here. And we got 12 stones to remind you. I remember hearing about a church in Atlanta called 12 Stones Church. I thought, a strange name for a church, right? When you first met, a lot of people probably wonder, why would anyone call themselves 12 stones? And yet, it comes from the story about we don't want to forget what God has done. We want to remember that He's been there for us. A movie called Unsung Hero. Maybe some of you watched it. I think it's on Netflix. It's a great movie. I encourage you to watch it. Unsung Hero. It's a story of the band, Christian band, for King Country, and how they got started. It's an amazing story, and it's really the unsung hero was the mom in the movie. So it's quite a heartwarming type of movie. She was the strength for the family, the hardships they faced. But it was like this movie was a reminder of where they'd been, the poverty and the hardships, and what God had brought them through to the success they had. And they just didn't want to forget. The song is a song by the same name. we don't want to forget what God has done for us. Unsung hero. Another song that they also do called "Burn the Ships" come from Australia. And there's an old idea that people used to explorers came across the ocean hundreds of years ago, and when they arrived, they'd burn the ships. Like, in other words, no going back. We're here to stay. And I think that's what the pile of stones was. The people of Joshua, like, this is a reminder what God has done. And we're not going back. We're here. God has been good. We're going on. I have a picture here that I keep up in my office. I maybe should frame it, but anyways, it was sent to me by um, and Susan John, who served as missionaries over in during the tsunami that hit southern India 15 years ago, whatever. Um, we wanted to do something as a church to help out people, and so there was one guy who lost his business, his fishing boat, was destroyed by the tsunami, and Community Bible Church bought him a boat so he could return to fishing. And so the boat running around over in the South Ocean, a fishing boat, says, "I donated to Community Bible Church." And I got a picture of it. I think, how cool is that? But it's those things that remind me, that, making a huge difference, not only here, but, in places in the world too. And it's good to remember those things with a picture or a pile of stones or whatever. Um, I didn't bring them down. I have some stones. I picked them up this morning, looked at them again. Reminded me of David. David, he faced Goliath, took 5 smooth stones. When I started this church, I also had picked up 5. I got 5 smooth stones, and I kind of said, God, I need a lot of guys in here to pull this off. And so one of those things I've just kind of kept as a reminder, because sometimes we need those reminders of the past, the things that God has done, God has helped us. Just remind us of God's goodness, because we can get into situations where we, like, God's not there, not listening. And it's not to forget and to mark some great moments that God has done. And so that's what those moments were in the story. Final thing I want to say in Joshua 4, as I read through it, this is God speaks to Joshua and says, "Command the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant law to come out of the Jordan." They all look and say, "Oh yeah, I forgot about those. They're still in the water there. They're been out there for hours. Everything crossed over, and they're still out there." And so finally, God says, "Tell the priest carrying the ark, it's your time. You can come out of the water now. Come up." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of Jordan," and the priests came up out of the river, carrying the covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. That's something to stand and watch that and see the priests make their way up. And there's nobody was lost. Everyone made the cross. It seemed like a day crossing, and they're all celebrating. All of a sudden, the waters just like a wave of waters coming down and just washing through, and they say, "Wow, we just went through time." I don't know what their reaction, but it might have been a powerful moment to see those waters come rushing down, and they recognized that God had brought them through. And as I said earlier, this solidified Joshua as a leader, like Moses, who brought them to the Red Sea, and now they're through this river. And it just solidified him, I think, as a leader. And just made me think also, the importance of a leader. God used Joshua to lead them through, and they faithfully did it and followed each of the steps that God laid out. And Joshua took cues from God and stepped up and led. And then a couple weeks ago, we started, God said to him, "Be strong and courageous. I'm choosing you now to lead people." And that's a bit of encouragement to me, leader, because I want to lead well, and I want to lead from God's direction, God's leadership. But I think also that we need leaders in the church. We need a whole bunch of leaders, because we've kids ministry going on next door. We got youth ministry going on midweek. And we need leaders in these areas. People will step up. People see they have the opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives. Why wouldn't I want to do that? Oh, I'm scared. Or, oh, I don't want to take that first step of faith. And what if the river's strong? And we got all the excuses, right? And sometimes you just to step out of faith and say, God, I want to make a difference. I want to help out. We were in a men's group this year, and something happened during the course of the year. One of the guys from the life kind of fell out, and we were able to come around and support him. And it just made a huge difference. I think, he was just so overcome by it. And it's like, you have that opportunity. Those are life-changing moments. And when you're a part of that, and when you're leading those sort of areas, you can make a big difference. And so, my kind of challenge today to you is you step up and lead too. There's some people here who, like Joshua, who stepped up and said, I'm going to step in and start leading. It may not be perfect. It may seem like the wrong time, like the wrong season completely. I can use that as an excuse because it's time to step up. This is about the time here we start thinking about groups in the fall because a lot of them are kind of wanting led to this year, and take a bit of a break this summer. We might do a few things, and then we start up in September. But it's nice to know who's leading this fall. And maybe there's some of you, maybe you're oriented towards kids, or maybe you're oriented towards youth or adults. And say, I'm willing to step up to help out in this. And if you feel that you have a calling or some in this area, I'd love to talk to you because we'd like to get that set up in the next few weeks for the fall. So I challenge you to think about stepping up and leading as Joshua stepped up and led well. So if you would like to take action on that, you can to Pat. Pat's still on vacation, back tomorrow, but you can get a hold of Pat if you want to get involved in kids ministry. Kara's over here, the youth ministry, or if you'd like to get involved in adult ministry in the small groups, just come and see me. I would love to help you to get plugged into that. But we would love to get established and have a great year of impacting lives around us. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, I thank you for this passage of Scripture. Just thank you for the vivid illustration it is of how we need to step of faith sometimes. And the challenges and fears we face, God, we know that when we're walking with you, that there will be blessing, there will be a few human compassion miracles, and some incredible joys as we celebrate the impact that we have as we work together. Lord, I just pray for Community Church that we would be strong, courageous, willing to take a step of faith when you ask us to. Know that caution can be the enemy of courage, and we live in a very cautious world. And Lord, we know that there's value in that, but we also know we need to step out in faith sometimes and do what courage is. And God, help us to trust you and walk with you. Lord, recognize that you are the great, almighty God. Just pray and ask you to fill us with your strength and your power. Those situations that make us question whether we can go on. God, give us that endurance and power. And we need your